Every single second of your life, completely beneath the surface of your awareness, your organ systems are coordinating this massive, highly complex symphony just to keep you stable. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to explore exactly how your body acts as an invisible engine, constantly working overtime to survive the absolute chaos of the external world. Let's break down how it all works. Here's how we're going to break it down today. 1. The science of survival. 2. Your internal ocean. 3. The homeostasis machine. 4. The power of feedback. And 5. Maintaining the balance. All right, Section 1. The science of survival. When we study the body, we're really looking at it from two different angles. First, we can ask why a function exists. We call this the teleological approach. For example, why do red blood cells transport oxygen? Well, because our cells desperately need it to survive. But we also have to ask how it physically occurs, which is the mechanistic approach. How do they actually do it? By chemically binding oxygen molecules to hemoglobin proteins. You absolutely need both the why and the how to truly understand the human machine. Now, mapping all this out, it definitely didn't happen overnight. We start way back with Aristotle in ancient Greece. He was the very first to connect physical structure to its function. Then, in the 2nd century, Galen pioneered some of the earliest biological experiments. Fast forward to the 17th century, and we've got William Harvey mapping out systemic blood circulation. But it was actually in the 19th century that a man named Claude Bernard made a massive, field-defining breakthrough. So, what was this massive breakthrough? It was Bernard's concept of the milieu intérieur. He realized that the human body isn't just a block of solid tissue. In fact, our cells survive solely because they are bathed in a perfectly controlled internal liquid environment. If this liquid environment changes too much, well, the cells die. This profound realization literally established physiology as the absolute scientific foundation of modern medicine. Moving on to Section 2, your internal ocean. So, just how aquatic are we exactly? Well, prepare to be amazed because an astonishing 60% of a healthy young adult male's weight is made up entirely of water. The remaining 40% is just everything else: bones, fat, muscle tissue. The vast majority of you is essentially a walking, talking body of water. And if we break that water down even further, things get really fascinating. About 67%, so roughly 2/3 of it, is actually trapped directly inside your cells. We call this intracellular fluid. That leaves 33% to flow freely outside the cells as extracellular fluid, and that includes your blood plasma and the fluid resting right between your tissues. Let's put that biological math into perspective for a second. If you picture a standard 70-kilogram adult, they are literally carrying around exactly 42 liters of water at all times. Seriously, no way, right? Of that 42 liters, 28 liters are locked safely inside the cells, and 14 liters are circulating on the outside. It's just a massive volume of fluid that needs to be perfectly, constantly regulated. But here's the kicker. It is not just pure water sloshing around. It's more like a highly charged electrical soup. There's a stark contrast between the inside and the outside of your cells. Your extracellular fluid is absolutely packed with sodium and chloride. Meanwhile, the intracellular fluid is completely dominated by potassium. And this chemical imbalance, it isn't an accident. Maintaining this exact tension is exactly how your nerves fire and how your muscles contract. All right, Section 3, the homeostasis machine. This brings us to homeostasis, a term coined by physiologist Walter Cannon way back in 1929, and it is the ultimate goal of your body. Homeostasis is the mechanism of maintaining a stable, relatively constant internal environment, completely despite the constant stress and chaos of the outside world. Whether you're freezing in a blizzard or sweating in a scorching desert, your internal machinery is working overtime to keep things perfectly balanced inside. So how exactly does this biological thermostat work? It's basically a 5-step pathway. First, a receptor detects a change, or a stimulus. Second, it sends an afferent signal right up to a control center, which is usually your brain. Third, the control center processes this information. Fourth, it fires an efferent signal back outward. And finally, step 5, an effector organ receives that instruction and executes a response to fix the problem and restore balance. Pretty neat, right? That brings us to Section 4, the power of feedback. How does the body know when to stop tweaking the dials? Well, it relies on two main strategies. Negative feedback is your body's peacemaker. It opposes or reverses a stimulus to maintain balance. Say your blood sugar goes up, negative feedback brings it back down. Positive feedback, on the other hand, is the instigator. It actually amplifies the initial stimulus, driving the system further and further away from its starting point. Now, while negative feedback is your day-to-day peacemaker for stability, positive feedback is absolutely essential for definitive, high-stakes events. It drives this escalation cycle until a final outcome is achieved. For example, during childbirth, cervical stretching triggers the release of oxytocin, which causes even stronger contractions, leading to more stretching until delivery finally occurs. Similarly, with blood clotting, the initial damage activates a cascade of clotting factors that rapidly multiply. Once the vessel is sealed up, the external event just stops the cycle. And finally, Section 5, maintaining the balance. Let's put this into a real-world scenario. Imagine you step outside on a blazing hot summer day. When facing severe heat stress, your thermoreceptors send an afferent signal straight to your hypothalamus. The hypothalamus acts as the control center and triggers a negative feedback loop. It sends out efferent signals commanding your sweat glands to produce sweat for evaporative cooling. And it causes vasodilation, which is widening the blood vessels in your skin to rapidly release that core heat right into the air. On the flip side, what if you jump into a freezing lake? Well, that cold stress triggers a completely different negative feedback loop. This time, the hypothalamus orders vasoconstriction, narrowing the blood vessels to keep all that warm blood deep in your core. It causes piloerection, making your body hair stand up to trap warm air. And it induces involuntary rhythmic shivering in your skeletal muscles. Yep, those classic chattering teeth, to rapidly generate metabolic heat. But hey, it's not just temperature we're dealing with. Have you ever stood up way too fast and felt dizzy for a split second? That is your baroreceptor reflex kicking into gear. You have specialized stretch receptors in your neck and heart constantly measuring blood pressure. When you stand up and your blood pressure suddenly drops, these receptors instantly detect the change and rapidly adjust your heart rate and vascular resistance so you don't pass out on the floor. Lastly, keeping this internal ocean perfectly balanced means keeping a really strict control over its acidity, maintaining a blood pH right between 7.35 and 7.45. This requires a massive, coordinated dual effort. Your respiratory system acts quickly, exhaling carbon dioxide to reduce carbonic acid in the blood. Meanwhile, your urinary system is working quietly behind the scenes, excreting hydrogen ions and carefully reabsorbing bicarbonate to ensure your cells don't literally drown in acid. Your body is just an absolute master of balance. It's constantly fighting the chaos of the outside world to keep your internal ocean perfectly calibrated. It is truly an incredible, invisible engine. But it leaves us with a really compelling question. In an era of unprecedented environmental extremes, rising global temperatures, and completely new physiological stressors, how far can our internal ocean be pushed before these ancient, beautifully tuned feedback loops finally fail? It's definitely something to think about the next time you feel a shiver, a drop of sweat, or even just the steady beat of your own heart.